Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
I'm Terry Woolman, and my guest today is Netherlands-based artist Tollak Ollestad. I appreciate you joining us every week, and I would like to share my intention that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance, and don't forget to have fun along the way. Let me tell you about my guest today. Singer-songwriter, keyboardist, and harmonica player Tollak Ollestad was born in Alaska and grew up in Seattle, Washington. Over the years, he has used his diverse talents in musical settings ranging from television, film, and album appearances to live concert performances. He has performed live and or toured with such acts as Don Henley, Michael McDonald, Jewel, Kenny Loggins, Christopher Cross, Andrea Bocelli, David Foster, and Seal, and has been featured on albums by artists such as Natalie Cole, Jarreau, Earth, Wind & Fire, Dave Grusin, Brenda Russell, Richard Page, and Gino Vanelli. Tollak also played the harmonica on the theme for the classic 90s TV show, Northern Exposure. After 20 years in Los Angeles, Tollak now lives in Europe, where he is active as a performer, writer, studio musician, and music educator-speaker. He was a featured TEDx speaker and has released 3 CDs of original music: Walk the Earth, Across the Rubicon, my personal favorite, and Reckless Jones. Tollak Ollestad, welcome to Making It.
Thank you, Terry. All right.
Thank you for staying up late. I know we've got a 10-hour time difference right now in the Netherlands, and it's great to see you, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. I have so much I want to talk to you about, and I'd like to start with yoga. Because yoga is something I actually remember, because you used to live in LA, Santa Monica, actually, and we've known each other a long time before you moved to Europe. But I remember when you started taking yoga classes, and it's become such an incredible, integral part of your life, not only as a person, but you also include it in your teaching.
Yeah, that's right. It's the first thing I ever taught, because I became a music teacher when I moved here, which I'd never done before. But I started yoga in LA, this place Yoga Works in Santa Monica. And I started teaching. After a few years, I got invited to start teaching it was this program called Yoga on the Inside. And it was teaching kids that were, it was like a juvenile detention center. So it was kids that were incarcerated. And this amazing yogi guy who I met just going to yoga classes, he had started this program with a couple partners, and they were going into all these juvenile detention centers and bringing yoga in. And he asked me, he said, would you want to try teaching one of these, teaching one of these classes? And I'm like, I've never taught anything, A, and B, I've never taken any yoga teacher training or anything. He goes, no. He goes, I think you'd be great. It's like, okay. So he goes, I'll send you out with one of the other guys who've done it a while. And we went out to this place out in East LA, and it was like, it had to get wanded in, go through the metal detector. That whole thing. It was like, okay. And it was amazing. And I immediately just really connected with the whole teaching thing anyway, but also with these kids that, came from they were all, some of them were gang members and people like that, but, just kids that came from really, really difficult backgrounds and stuff. And it's and that the yoga really was this incredible positive thing that they really responded to, and that helped them. And it was really cool to be a part of that. And for me, but I've had a yoga practice, all these years since '95. And it's been a really big part of my creating balance. And, living in LA, as it has its own special set of challenges for you, emotionally and psychologically. And yoga to me was a really great way to create more balance. And that's why I also mentioned to you that there's some programs at the music conservatory here that they use Tai Chi and Pilates and yoga. And they asked me to do some of those classes for these students for that exact reason. And now, besides the pandemic, young people nowadays have just, are really dealing with way more stress, and just, it's a much different environment for them. So it really becomes a huge thing for them to have this thing that helps them get a little more balance and helps them to feel, just more on the ground, have their feet on the ground. And so that's been
especially,
great.
Again, like you're saying, during this past year, I know that you've even still have a curfew going on in the Netherlands where you've got to stay inside after 10 p.m., I believe.
Yeah. Actually, I think it just lifted. I looked in the paper, and I guess it just lifted. But yeah, we had that for a few months. And yeah, for the kids, it's a little more. Of course, yeah. I mean, they also, they get around it because they're young kids, and it's like, yeah, what are you going to do? But still, yeah, indeed, it's more stressful. But that really before the pandemic, even that was. I mean, they started this program a few years ago, and it was because they were just noticing that just the environment, the modern environment we live in with social media and less just personal contact. I mean, in my opinion, that's what it comes down to, is just the lack of personal contact, more in-depth personal contact. I mean, of course, they socialize, they go out and they do things and stuff. It's like, but real in-depth personal contact is a different thing than just kind of light socializing. So I when I was teaching at the Pop Academy, I did these songwriting retreats on there's these islands that are off the coast here that they're wonderful. They're magical islands. They're really wonderful to go to. And we would go for a long weekend, and it would be a songwriting retreat. And we would go there, and it would just be, and at the beginning they didn't even have Wi-Fi. But it was just, the whole setup was just like, okay, we're going to stay at this place. It's kind of, a bunch of rooms. We're all staying there. We're doing, we're songwriting, but we're also cooking together. Mm-hmm. We're, of course I go, we'll have a yoga class somewhere in the middle of the day, do a nature walk. And it was so dirt simple, but it was like, there was so much, intensive togetherness, and interacting. And that human connection, and it was always amazing to me how every time we did that, afterwards, these young, college students were all just like, "That was amazing." It's like, well, that was pretty simple, really. I mean, there weren't any bells or whistles. It was really just that human contact, and just people would and just watching people open up, because they're in this environment with people, other kids, a lot of them knew each other anyway. And it's just like where they feel comfortable. And at nighttime, when we would do the last kind of round of songwriting or playing songs that they'd written that day, and then it would just turn into a conversation. It's like people talking about things, and people suddenly going like, this is something I'm really like, I've been thinking about a lot, but I haven't talked to anybody about. And it's like, oh my God, this is like a vitamin that they're missing. It's like, you're not getting vitamin D. No wonder you're having this issue with whatever,
Yeah, that's why you're so tired. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right. And so all of a sudden you put this vitamin in them, and they're reacting like, whoa, that's a cool vitamin. But, and unfortunately it's like, yeah, then you go back, to your regular routine, and it's like, okay, well, that was cool. But I've always felt like I would love to, I wish that could be something that was a regular thing. I always felt like that should be like monthly, every month you should do that.
Yeah. I was amazed when I went to Berklee College, which is one of the top music schools in the world. And it's a 4-year degree, like they're accredited, but they didn't require a physical education credit or a nutrition class. And I actually remembered complaining to them about that, when they were coming at me for, they didn't think I had enough, history of Western civilization credit. And I just said, how can you lecture me about that when you don't require 2 semesters of phys ed, of yoga or dance or weight training or stretching or, it just seemed like they were really sort of missing the big picture. So, you know, you're talking about nature and just saying it, you know, it was not real overly complicated, but that's such an important part of not just being physically healthy and emotionally and spiritually healthy, but of the creative process. You know, I was just reading this quote this morning, actually, about by Bjork, who talks about her creative process in writing songs is walking through nature is where oftentimes she starts, you know, by listening to the sounds. And if anybody who's ever read anything or listened to Joni Mitchell's music with her altered tunings that she does, which is really a big, unique part of what she does, she would go sit by the river and tune her guitar to the water. She's like you, because Tollak, sometimes you talk about that you don't have a lot of formal musical training, but
I have no formal musical training, actually.
That's kind of remarkable at the level of talent that you've achieved or skill set. But it's certainly clearly not a requirement for becoming an artist or a great artist. And again, the fact that Joni doesn't know really the technical names of the chords or how she tunes a guitar, but the fact that she tunes it to the river or the stream that she's sitting by really speaks to what you're talking about of why that was such a cool part of your teaching experience on the islands, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's becoming a teacher. Okay, so just kind of backing up a little bit, the last thing in the world I ever thought I'd ever become would be a music teacher, because I didn't go to college. I didn't have any formal musical training. I had some private lessons, a few, I mean, not a lot. And so really,
even your singing, you're just a natural born singer. You didn't study vocal training?
I did not, but I wouldn't say I was a natural born a singer either, in that because when we talked about, you know, playing with Michael McDonald, I always remember hearing people always talk about like that guy from the moment he opened his mouth in like junior high, it was like, damn, right, that guy, what a voice. And I didn't have that. The first time I sang on a stage, I remember my brother, who was a musician also. At the time, he was a professional musician. I always remember he said, he goes, it's all like, you know, us Ollestads, we're not really singers so much. But he goes, the harmonica was great though, you know. I played like the blues harmonica. So I didn't naturally have a voice, but I just had a great desire to do it. And that can, you know, and I had more aptitude, I think, probably for harmonica and, you know, some other things. But the vocal thing, I really felt like I just willed it into being. I know it. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. You can't be objective about it sometimes, but I just knew what I liked when I heard it, and I just kept doing it until it you know, it sounded better and you know, incrementally better and better. And I knew what I wanted it to sound like. And, you know, that's always, I often say this too, even with the harmonica. I remember like talking about, you know, Stevie Wonder being my biggest influence, and what's so phenomenal about him is just all the incredible little small details in this playing. And I was really lucky. I feel lucky that I managed to understand that those things were there, because a lot of times what he played was quite simple. And I remember the first time I was playing things of his, I was like, well, I can play what he just played, but there's all these things, and I realized I'm missing all that stuff, and I don't know what it is yet. And it was frustrating in a way, but in the same time, it was like, but the fact that you're recognizing that means the seeds are planted, and that's what it is. For me, a lot of what I feel like learning music is about planting seeds and watering those seeds. And just like, you know, I love using the garden as a metaphor often, because it's like, yeah, when you plant seeds, you water them and you wait, you know, and it takes weeks and months. And the problem we have oftentimes as, you know, whether you're learning anything, but if you're learning music, is that we're really terrible gardeners. You know, we have a tendency to plant the seeds, and after watering them for a couple of days, go, oh, Jesus, what's going on, man? Nothing's showing up. It's like, yeah, well, just keep watering. just keep watering. It's good. It's going to come. And that's what it was like. I feel like for my voice and also for my harmonica was that, yeah, it wasn't very good in the beginning, but it was this desire. I wanted to do it so badly, and I just kept, if you just keep doing it, it's, in a lot of ways, that's it. Persistence really is sometimes more important than having that raw talent where it's just like right away, it's like, whoa, man, you just hit the bricks running,
Well, I fall in that category with you, as a musician. Yeah. A lot of what I have is persistence and tenacity and a fire and a will to
absolutely
to get great or as close to greatness as possible.
In some ways too, I think, and also probably we have in common too, is that I think that quality is also what carries you through your musical life, that you still have that. I think we're more likely to be like, later in your career, you still have the fire, you still want to do like cool stuff and you want to find new things to do. And that comes from that mindset that you had from the beginning, that it was like, yeah, I'm just always hearing things. We talked about that the other day too. It was like, you're hearing things that are beyond you. And it's just like, yeah, it's just a little beyond me, but man, I feel it. I hear it. I want to get there.
And I want it.
Yeah, and I want it. And it's like, that never stops. And I still have it. And I know you still have it too, where it's just like, I still hear things where it's like, ooh, that would be nice. I'm just not almost there. Let me get there. It's just kind of like, holding a carrot out in front of you your whole life. You're just constantly reaching for that carrot. And, but yeah, I think interesting things happen from that.
Listening to you talk about your journey as a singer, because I didn't know that, that was your experience. Yeah, when we became friends, you already, to me, were a fully formed singer, piano player, harmonica player. Even though you were still developing as an artist, as a writer, and we all continue to develop. That's the beauty of what we do. Yeah. But I didn't really know that about you, and it brings me to this question right now. I went and rewatched your TED Talk this morning. Which I had seen when it came out a few years ago and loved it. And I want to talk a little more in depth about the heady intellectual part of the creative process that you kind of unveil. Okay. But there's one thing that you said in that really speaks to what you're saying about your singing. And, when your brother said us Ollestads are not really singers,
right,
is that you talk about having no fear of judgment in the TED Talk as your own personal experience, that because of this just desire that you're saying, nobody was forcing you to do anything, and you did it for the pure joy of doing everything.
Yeah, right. That the thing without
judgment, I suppose.
Well, and the thing was that that was actually a bit of luck in the fact that I was extraordinarily insecure and afraid of people's judgment. But with the advantage I had, because the first thing I was doing was playing harmonica, was that I was in my room with my records, and there was nobody watching me. So then I wasn't subject to, because if someone was watching me, then I would have been really self-conscious. Right. And because I had the luxury of that not being the case, I managed to be able to just make all the terrible mistakes and stuff that you have to do. I remember my mother telling me one time, she goes, oh yeah, when you first started the harmonica, it was kind of rough, some of the sounds coming out of your room, it was hopefully, it's like, are you okay in there? It's like, yeah, Mom, I'm good. But, just being able to make, I love this quote, success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. And it was like, I feel like that's the thing we have, what we're born with. We're born with that. We're as toddlers, that's what we have. And that's why we are like the most powerful learning machines on the planet. We literally are. Because there is no fear. Everything is just experience, and you're just in the moment. And I got a little piece of that back because I was in my room and I was just super fascinated with this thing, and I wanted to know about it. And I made all kinds of terrible mistakes and just slowly let myself move forward to it. And And I didn't have a timeline. And it's just that thing about this phrase of being freedom from outcome. You know, that's a really interesting concept, because in the West, I think we're super conditioned about outcome. You're supposed to get a certain outcome. You do a certain thing, and in a certain amount of time, you get a certain outcome. And I just, I read this thing, and I'm sorry if I'm I'm piling up digressions here, but I hope they're going to make sense. They're going to make sense in the end. But I'm really fascinated with indigenous cultures. That I was reading about a guy who was in Africa studying indigenous cultures, and he was talking about all these things he had observed. But when he talked about the music, this one thing he said just stuck out to me. He said, because what I noticed is that they don't do music to sound good. So there's a right outcome thing, right? So it's not about sounding good. They do music because it's this thing that needs to be expressed. It's their humanity that needs to be expressed. And because it's so free of that burden of outcome, it is beautiful. It is amazing. That's the thing. I think almost all indigenous music, when you listen to it, that's what strikes you. It's like, it's so pure. Because no one is, after you watch one of those performances, there's not one of those people that are going, I don't think I nailed that one part. I mean, Jesus, it's like, no, they're just so in the moment. And I feel like in the West, we can learn a lot from that. We can learn a lot from trying to let go of that, that burden of I need to create a certain outcome. And it's hard to do. I mean, because you grow up in that environment. It's like, that influence is heavy. Those things that were, instilled in you from a really young age are hard to get around. But they can be.
You grew up in, is it Seward or Seward, Alaska?
I was born in Seward, Alaska.
Okay.
But we moved to, I'll give you, this is quite an interesting, fateful story as well. My mother, bless her, really hated living in Alaska. And I'm so glad I didn't grow up there, even though I love going back up to visit. But this was a little town that if I'd grown up there, I don't think I would have probably ever found music, or my brother even for that matter. But in any case, she really wanted us to move to Seattle. My dad didn't want to. He was a commercial fisherman. He lived up there. And they had the World's Fair happening in Seattle. She goes, well, she talked my dad into coming down. Let's get a house and stay down there for a few months. And somehow she worked that out. While we were down there doing that, the Alaska earthquake hit. And a tidal wave came in and washed our house off its foundation.
I never knew that.
Yeah. So it was like, guess what? We're moving to Seattle. So my mom was like, cool. That she was happy about it, and it was a great thing.
Was your dad able to continue fishing from Seattle?
Yeah. He was also a longshoreman, so he did also longshoreman work in Seattle. Mm-hmm. And then he did go back. What he did is he went back up to Alaska to do commercial fishing. So he did both, and so as a result, from the age of 3, I grew up in Seattle. So Seattle's really, in effect, my hometown.
Right. And by the way, your sister ended up working on the pipeline. Did you ever do a summer stint working on that? Pipeline? No, I didn't do that. What I did is when I was in high school, I did 3 summers fishing with my dad. Salmon fishing, it was gill netting, they call it, and which was actually, it was a great experience on one hand, but I'd already started music before all that happened, and it was like a exclamation mark on I am never doing this for a living. It's like, don't you think it's important in life to find out as much what you want to do as what you don't want to do?
Indeed, exactly right. I think it's absolutely right. Yeah.
So tell me about your move to Los Angeles, because we all have unique stories. Those of us who came from another destination, another city, and made an actual decision and commitment and trek to load the Honda station wagon up or whatever it was and drive to New York or LA or Chicago or Prague or wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
What possessed you and what was that like that first year?
Well, so up to that point, I'd been working in clubs in Seattle. It's just playing in cover bands. And the last couple of years, I got into this very steady cover band thing. I remember at the time, at first, it was like, oh, it's great because they work 1 month, 5 nights a week. Because that was back in the days when there were 6-night-a-week gigs. And I was doing that before. I was like, oh, but this gig, it's 5 nights a week, 1 month, and then 1 month is 3 nights a week, and you go back and forth. And I was making my entire living off of music, and it's like, well, this is pretty cool. But then it was also hitting that point where going like, oh, so is this it? Is this what I do? And I was lucky. I had the piano teacher that I was taking some lessons from. He was actually this kind of a genius piano player, which was at that time was kind of wasted on me, probably. But actually, in a lot of ways, it's funny because there's a few cool little things that he taught me and I remember, but mostly I don't remember most of the stuff he taught me, but I remember him saying to me, Seattle's a graveyard of talent. You should go to LA. And it really, that hit me. It was like, and that was kind of like stood in the back of my mind for a long time. And eventually, I guess that idea, that seed just kind of kept growing. And especially when I got that point where I realized, I guess I'm just going to play in lounges, cover music if I just stay here. Mm-hmm. And so I asked one of my very best friends I went to high school with, who was a bass player, still a very, very, very close friend of mine. And his name's John Sampson. And I came to him and I go, John, what do you think about, I don't know, moving to LA? And he's like, dude, let's do it. It's like, okay, well, I guess we're in. So, and it did help having someone who wanted to go down,
So you came down with a buddy.
And well, actually, no, so the third part of the extra little wrinkle that happened, my first break in music came just at the end of my living in Seattle. So after I'd kind of made that commitment and I'm going to do it, I got contacted by Kenny G to play a tour with him before he became the huge Kenny G. It was his first kind of break, though, was that he had this album that Kashif produced. Mm-hmm. And he had a vocal tune called Hi, How Are You Doing? That was kind of a small hit on R&B radio.
Right.
And so he came down and saw me playing with this lounge trio. And it was funny. But he was like, yeah, cool, man. Yeah, you play great and you sing really nice. Because, there was some background vocals for that thing. So we go, that'd be great. And I always remember, this is actually a quote that always sticks in my head for all life, is after he's heard me play, I came out and he goes, dude, if I could sing like that, I'd be a millionaire. It's like, how'd that work out? Right. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Yeah, all right.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
And by the way, don't forget to buy Starbucks stock, when it's at the beginning.
I know. Oh, my God. It's just incredible, man. Yeah. It's so incredible how he did. So,
by the way, that's an interesting aside, because our mutual friend, Vale Johnson, who I've had on my show, also grew up in Seattle and has been in Kenny's band since the very beginning. Kenny's been he basically joined like a year after I did that little in a similar story. Yeah, Kenny heard him playing
tour because that band basically
club.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
Which by the way, just speaks to whatever you're doing counts, wherever it is and whatever it is and whenever it is.
Yeah,
somebody might, there might be somebody watching and listening that could change the trajectory of your life.
Well, yeah, that's what I was just talking about this thing I'm doing on my Facebook page, recording session retrospective, where every week I go over some memory I've had or some experience I had recording with different artists. And so I was talking about this thing with NSYNC, where I came to fill in for Stevie Wonder, and he showed up last minute. But that the woman that Robin, you knew Robin Wiley, or did you know Robin Wiley?
Yes.
Yeah. So Robin that was the perfect example of that, where it's like she had been struggling in LA and she was having a problem, wasn't making enough money. And it was like, well, you got this chance, you can go down to Florida and be a vocal coach for the Mouseketeers.
Yeah, the Mickey Mouse.
I remember she was like really embarrassed to even say, it's like, oh God, she's like, but I'm broke, And
do you know something? I actually interviewed for that job.
Did you really?
I did, because my friend Barbara Bentry was the vocal director for that show, and she recommended me to be the music director, and I didn't get it.
Oh my God! So you could have been the coach for Justin Timberlake and Christina Aguilera and Britney Spears. Yeah. But that's a great example of like, here she went down and they ended up being, these kids ended up being future stars, and she was their coach, and then that led to all that success for her. And indeed, you just never know. I mean, and that's what I said about that. I said, ironically, I think more often than not, where the most interesting things come in your life are when you're not expecting it at all. But when you're expecting it, like, whoa, we got this thing going and it's looking really great, man. We think it's like most of that stuff is like, God, no, it's just like face plant, It just, it's just interesting how that works. So, I mean, in a way, that's why it's just, life happens. Life is what happens while you're making the plans, and why you need to kind of just keep your mind open and just, trust the path that opens up in front of you, and don't second guess sometimes those things. That's just an intuitive thing. It's
so many of your experiences that I know of, and mine as well, and many of our peers, have really just been doors that open, not front doors always, side doors, back doors, of just some opportunity that you say yes to that is, on surface level, maybe not even a great choice, but it just seems intuitively like it. Why not? It's a good thing to do. You go up, you show up, you bring it. And then next thing you know, you're on a tour with a major artist, or playing on a record, or in a movie or a TV show or something like that. To me, it feels like there's a random factor in the arc of anybody's career. Is that your perception on this? Because you've played with a lot of major artists.
No, I think a lot of it is super arbitrary. So, I mean, that's the thing about having like a really, I've known those people, you've known those people too, that have like this very clear plan. It's like, I got this plan, this is what I'm doing. And it's like, okay, that's cool. But hopefully you're also flexible enough to, if that plan crashes and then all of a sudden this side road opens up that you weren't thinking about. And that is, I think it's the thing about flexibility. It's like, if you are a really flexible person in that sense, that's just going to be a huge plus for you, because you're going to be able to like zig and zag at whatever point in the road where things diverge. And I think sometimes, you also know those stories of people like, it's like, oh man, they said no to that thing because they were whatever, some other practical thing made them say no. And that was, and they kind of even knew inside, I don't know, it seemed cool. I don't know, but it's like, I mean, you really, I guess, there's not, what can you say? It's like, I think your intuition is like a muscle, and you need to, the more you use it, the better it can serve you, like you'll find that it's like, it speaks to you, it whispers to you, but it whispers a little more clearly when the more you kind of let yourself trust it,
Absolutely.
It seems like to me. Yeah.
I want to talk more about your TED Talk, and then we have a couple musicians in the audience that I see that I'd like to bring on stage to ask a few questions. But tell me first, at some point you were getting burned out, disillusioned, or just ready for a change of living in Los Angeles, because it's a grind. And so you met a woman.
Yeah.
And you jumped off a cliff. You moved to another country, another continent.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me that story.
I mean, in some ways, it's not so different, really, than when I think about it. I went, well, it was a crazy leap, but I mean, actually moving to LA was a crazy leap because I was making a good living in Seattle, and I didn't know anybody in LA. I didn't know any musicians in LA, and I jumped in my car. We talked about it, my little Toyota station wagon, like loaded to the gills.
Right.
Driving for 2 days to get down to LA and didn't know how are you going to survive? It's like, not any of that stuff. I guess, I don't know if I guess a case could be made for Arrested Development that I didn't lose that. 20 years later, I just, what it was, it's like, for me, I guess it felt like I reached a point in my LA life where it felt like it was getting repetitive for me. I didn't feel like it was progressing. Now it's like, okay, I'm still doing some things that are nice things, but they're a little more repetitive. And again, it was just like that. I was already feeling restless and like, I was really thinking about what else could I do? And I was touring with Venice. Mm-hmm. Actually, I was filling in. I wasn't even in the band. It was Chris Horvath. Mm-hmm. Chris, he still does play keyboards with them. And Chris and his wife at the time just had a baby, and I was like, oh, well, I can't do this tour. And Alexis, Alexis Sklereski? Okay, bass player. He was playing.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah. He recommended me, and they said, yeah, you want to fill in for Chris on this tour we're doing in the Netherlands, because the band is huge in the Netherlands. It's like, oh, okay, never been there. And so we played there, and I met this woman, Miranda, and it was I took it as a sign. I went, I think maybe this means I should come here and check it out, even though it made no logical sense at all.
You didn't speak Dutch.
No, and my Dutch still actually is not great at all. It should be a lot better, but yeah. Everybody speaks English really well here, right. So that's the advantage and the disadvantage. It's the advantage for being an American here. It's a disadvantage for getting better at your Dutch.
So looking back, I mean, certain things opened up for you that might not have happened, staying in the States. Performing with Andrea Bocelli. Various things that, or even if that didn't impact it, it didn't stop it. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that indeed. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess Andrea Bocelli happened with, David Foster, calling my mother's house because I had my old number forwarded there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess if I was living in LA, I guess he would have called my number there. So I guess that probably would have happened. But the big sea change for me was that I got there. I mean, really, because here I showed up here, and I'm like hanging out in this town, Groningen. I had no idea what I was going to do. Really, it was once again. It's like, okay, well, I'm wandering around, and I went into this music store, and I met this bass player there, and he hooked me up with some musicians, and he goes, man, I heard some of your music, and we can make a band, you can do some gigs. And we started playing some gigs around. And then the drummer was teaching at this new school. It was like this new progressive experimental academy. There was arts and music together, which was something that was a new concept in itself, because it was like in the same small building are art students and music students, and they're collaborating too. And it was such a really interesting, incredible environment. But that drummer said, hey, I showed the director your website, and he wants to talk to you. And to me, it was like mystifying. Like, why would he want to talk to me? I mean, to do a performance or something. I was like, no, he wants to talk about teaching. And so I met with him. And again, I'm like saying, I've never taught music. I never taken one college class in music. But he said, yeah, well, why don't you just come and try it out? And so I did. And really from the first moment I started, did the first class, it was like the light bulb came on and I went, this is cool. I love this.
Well, was the light bulb in that you felt like you had some life experience or some knowledge or insight that was of value and that you clearly were passionate about sharing?
No, really what it was is just the process itself was so right away. I just, I had this room full of these really extraordinary young students. They were really interesting kids. And it's like, also here I'm sitting with all these Dutch kids and they're all like, that was the other thing. This school was, because it was such a progressive new kind of school, the students that ended up there were actually a lot of the students who didn't fit in at the conservatory.
Right.
It was like, because this was like I called it the school of black sheep, because it was like, well, it's a school where part of the focus is about being an entrepreneur and being a musician and also developing, just all these other elements of being a musician and a business person and all that stuff that weren't so much covered in conservatory. So they weren't necessarily all like just, the amazing guitar player, bass player, drummer. It was like, but they were interesting, creative kids, and some of them were also doing a little bit of like, maybe they also did video class, but then they also did music class. So that was what's special about that school, and that it was just like to be around all these young people, and just they had such great personalities, and I just loved the process. I just went, this is an amazing process, and yeah, I guess I felt like I had something to give in that environment. Mm-hmm. I felt right away like this is a good click, and that I feel their response to me. And then my learning process started too, of like, wow, I really started thinking about what do I really think about, the education environment, and what works best, and what's important, and what's not important, and what in traditional academic environments do I think can be improved or changed. And that's what turned into my TED Talk, more or less,
Right.
Were a lot of those things.
And the TED Talk, and I see Troy just jumped on stage. I'm gonna unmute you, or you can unmute yourself in a moment. But the TED Talk, it's titled "Discovering the Musical Subconscious."
Yeah.
And it's a discourse along with musical demonstration on the need for increased awareness and focus on the intuitive subconscious connection to learning, making, and performing music.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful.
Indeed.
What was your intention with the TED Talk? I mean, you definitely had a really clear point of view. And by the way, just to encourage people to go listen to it, you're going to get to hear a really beautiful rendition, harmonica and string quartet rendition of Ave Maria, which really spoke to your point. And point being, nobody told you couldn't. So you
because it was a classical piece, and I have no classical background at all, but I love that piece, and I made my own, cello arrangement, cello quartet arrangement, mm-hmm. and which of course I used. I made a virtual arrangement, and then in Logic I had it printed out. But I wouldn't have thought, well, geez, can I make an arrangement? It's like, but yeah, exactly. I just, well, I want to. I love the piece of music, and that's all I need. That's all I've ever needed as a motivation to do something. Is that mm-hmm. I feel really inspired to do it. That's really the bottom line, and that's exactly everything I ever did in music was that I was inspired to do it. And that's my little catch line I use in that is well, nobody told me I couldn't, fortunately, because I was impressionable. And if someone had told me, no, God, you can't do that. You can't do it. That might have had an effect on me, that I was really lucky that no one did.
Well, you were more than impressionable. I mean, you've spoken publicly, including in your TED Talk, about being painfully shy or very shy. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, very painfully shy.
So what's the obvious solution? Oh, put yourself in front of thousands of people and have them look and listen to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's a pretty common story. There's a lot of very famous performers that, you hear about, like, oh, actually, like, Johnny Carson said for all 30 years he did the show, he said he had butterflies in his stomach before he went out to do his monologue. So it's like, it's a pretty typical thing. But especially what was funny for me about doing the TED Talk is that I reflected on when I was in school, pretty much all through school. I remember that the thing I dreaded most was the teacher calling on me to speak out loud in class. It was like, oh man, please don't make me talk in front of the class. Cause I was just so self-conscious. And it's like, how weird is it to like, intentionally put yourself in front of a theater full of people and to memorize a speech, and just it was a great challenge because I just had never done anything like that. And I put these musical pieces in there that I had to do as well. So I kind of made, we were talking about that too. You build a challenge for yourself. You go, okay, now I got to figure out how to do it. Right. And yeah, man. And even just forgetting, I was so terrified of forgetting a line. And I did, actually. I forgot a line at one point. And right when I was really literally like, I forgot it, and then it came back to me like 3 seconds later, which felt like 3 minutes later. It was just like, it was like you're in an airplane, all of a sudden the engine cuts. It's like, and then the engine came back on again. It's like, oh, Jesus. Oh God, that was amazing. But yeah, it was an amazing thing. And yeah, so to answer your question, my motivation was through my experience with teaching till now. I mean, I still do coaching stuff with different people. It's just, I felt the lack of the intuitive approach to music in favor of what I feel, anyway, in my opinion, in the academic environment, is a more mechanical approach to learning music. And I don't know. I mean, and also because I'm around a lot of conservatory students, and I do some work with some of them. I play with some of them once in a while. And I just see sometimes that I feel like there's something missing. And it's because they're not giving it a chance to explore and develop that intuitive side. I feel like that's, in any case, that's, my opinion.
You talk a lot about feeling, when, and Troy, one of the things that you said in your observation about Tollak is his soulfulness. And I agree with that. I've always connected with that and been drawn to that in your music and the songs that you write, and the way that you sing, the way you play piano, the way you play harmonica. And you talk about musicality start having three main areas: feeling and emotion, timing, feel, groove, and deep ear skills. And you start with feeling and emotion. And I noticed, the great Al Schmidt, engineer producer, just passed away just a few days ago, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him, and he was remarkable, and he was one of the most, he grew up learning engineering from his uncle, from as a little kid in New York. And
really,
so he was one of the most, some people say the greatest engineer in the music industry as far as technicality and skill, but he always and he mentored a lot also, but he always talked about the emotional aspect of it. At the end of the day, just how does it make you feel? That's how he led himself through life, and that's how you do as well.
Well, I saw someone had posted on Facebook, actually, I forgot which one of our musician friends had posted a quote from him, and they're a little tribute to him. And he was saying something, it said something to the effect where he said, he goes, when someone really responds to a song, they don't care how, what the snare sounds like. It's like they're responding to the feeling they're getting from the song. And I think that's so extraordinary for an engineer who's, basically a big part of his job is to look at the nuts and bolts of like, how's that snare sounding and blah, blah, blah. It's like, but he had just that overview that was beyond that, where he was like, how does this feel? And more than just like, are all the technical elements all right? It's like, actually, they don't even need to all be right. If the emotional side of it is, there was actually another well-known engineer whose name escapes me, who did a tutorial on YouTube that I came across, and I loved where he was describing the technical elements, and at one point he goes, and then there's vibe, and he goes, when you achieve vibe, he goes, you actually can forget probably pretty much all the other stuff I just said, which is the same thing. It's just like, yeah, actually, if you capture, really, it's like if you capture some piece of magic is what it is. And it's like, it's the musical spirit that lives in human beings. I mean, it's like music exists because of human beings. Yeah. It's this thing, it's like a software program, and we're the computer that it runs on, and it's like, it's fine. That magic thing. It's like, because I think a lot of some of the great recordings that are just incredible, if you probably tore them apart, it's like you could find all kinds of technical things. Or like, actually, that bass sound is not really very balanced, and actually, blah blah blah. It's like there'd be a lot of things you could go like, but on the aggregate, it's like, no, it's just like it's just there's some vibe that was captured here that's just freaking great.
I read something, Tollak, that you wrote, and Troy, I'm saying this because not only are you a father, you've got grown kids and young kids and grandkids, and but also you have, as many of us do, musicians, a childlike quality to you. And Tollak, I read that you actually talk about a childlike innocence and curiosity that moves. That's a sort of a core value in a way of what you do, and you make the comparison of the process of learning music with the process of being a child learning a language. And the coolest part of what I read about this, and this is what I want to hear you elaborate on, is you said when you're learning a language as a child, you're making massive amounts of mistakes. Nobody's judging you, and you're just able to go at your own pace. And at the end of the process, essentially, you become a master. I'm paraphrasing, but
exactly.
Can you talk about that? Because I loved reading that.
Well, you know what's to me is really a really interesting thing about, if you look at language, for instance, like in the academic levels of fluency in language, you have like there's C1, C2, and all these academic levels. But the top level is native speaker, and a native speaker is someone, before you take your first grammar class in grade school, you're speaking at native level. So you've done it completely in an intuitive way, and it's like that. So for me, that's kind of a powerful example, like that, and because I'm talking about learning languages myself, my Dutch kind of sucks. My Italian is actually pretty decent. Mm-hmm. But when I remember when I first started feeling I'm getting pretty kind of decently fluent here, and the humbling moment was seeing like some little 5-year-old girl talk and just realizing, oh my God, no, that's native level. And I got a ways to go to like even get close to that. But it's like, that just happened intuitively. And that's how I learned. And that's what I say in my TED Talk. I learned music like language. And I was talking about, jazz. I was showing those jazz licks. They were just words to me, just like all those little,
right.
It's just like those are just words to me, and I learned them like language, and I didn't need to know the it's just like, for instance, saying like, okay, so what's the conjunctive adverb? All right. Okay. I think you probably nobody's going to be able to tell you what that is, but we all use it all the time. Right. But we know it intuitively. And that's, for me, it's more powerful to know that stuff because I guess I push back on this concept of like, when I hear people talk about music theory, and there's nothing wrong. Some people are just fascinated with music theory, and I think that's fine if you study that because you have a huge fascination with it. But to say that you need to study it or to really understand it, to me is nuts, because it's like, again, it's like language. It's like learning what the conjunctive adverb is, and the description of it doesn't mean like, once I've read that, it's like, oh man, now I'm going to burn on that conjunctive adverb, man, because I know what it really is.
Right.
It's like, no, if anything, I'll be more self-conscious about it. Now I'm just doing it organically. It just happens because I just know how it sounds.
Well,
and that's,
let me ask you something. And I don't think I've ever asked anybody this question, but I'm comfortable asking you because we've been friends for many, many years. And You, although you would not likely describe yourself this way, you have been described in the music industry as one of the world's greatest, or a master of the chromatic harmonica. You are spoken about and compared, or not compared to, but you are in the same sentence as the other great masters. Toots Thielemans, Stevie Wonder, and Tollak Ollestad. They're said in the same sentence. I'm not. My question isn't, do you think you are a master? Apparently, other people do, and you again have become masterful at this instrument in a very intuitive way, like you were talking about with language and words and phrases. What do you think? Like, how do you perceive the idea of being a master or masterful?
Yeah, well, actually, I think of this quote from Ernest Hemingway, where he said, "We are all apprentices in a craft where no one becomes a master." Yeah. And that's for me how I can never even think of in terms of, am I, how I don't know, I don't. I mean, it's super flattering when people say those kinds of things, but I mean,
I would imagine.
But to me, it's like, I mean, it is that thing of like, where they, like with anything, where they say the more you know, or more you learn about something, especially like, say, for instance, science. If you learn, the more, any scientist will say that, it's like you can learn vast amounts of knowledge in science, but what all it really does is just show you how much you don't know. And that's what I think for me, you know that as well. It's like, the more doors you open in music, especially to the kind of deeper levels of expressiveness and the subtle, not about just like learning more, again, technical knowledge, but just more about what's that deep stuff about really the vibe, right? We were talking about, creating vibe and creating magic. It's like the more you get into opening those doors, the more you realize, oh my God, I am scratching the surface, and that's where you look at some of our heroes. I mean, some of the, we were talking about Stevie Wonder earlier. It's like, I mean, there's people like that. They're like a once in a century musician that's born, or Jaco Pastorius, some people like that, where it's like, there's only one of them, and like, once in a while someone's born like that. But, most of us are mere mortals, and we're lucky if we get to even scratch the surface of that. It's still great. It's still great when you get to scratch the surface, but it does, for me, it should keep you humble. It should make you just realize, oh, no, you're it's like, you probably know this quote from Herbie Hancock, where he said, a great teacher is one who realizes that they are a student themselves, whose job is not to dictate the answers, but to inspire their creativity so they find the answers themselves. And it's like, that's it. It's like, I'm a lifelong student. And my teaching practice, even with my students, is like, I don't look at it like I'm teacher, dictating answers to you. It's like, no, we're collaborating. And it's like, I'm learning also, and you're learning. And I've been on the road a little longer, so I have some perspectives from being on the road longer, but also I might be a little too stiff on some things, and that you're going to help loosen me up about those things because you have a much, fresher and open perspective on something. So it's a beautiful collaborative process to me. At its best, teaching is very collaborative.
Absolutely. And one of the things that speaks to that changed my perspective is I studied martial arts for over 20 years. And
didn't know that.
The point, this was after you, maybe, when did you move to Europe? How many years ago?
2004.
So I was already doing it. I just wasn't talking about it.
Okay.
But I was studying, and I started studying because I was in a bicycle accident and ended up with spinal fusion in my neck, and it was this big deal, and it was a way to work my way back to recovery. But it's something that really changed my life. And the interesting thing is, at the point, many years into studying, I was told that I was ready to take my black belt test, and I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel that I knew enough. I didn't feel flexible enough physically, all those things. First of all, I was told by my sensei, that's not for you to decide what you're ready for and what you're not. And it's not for you to tell your sensei that. So you're going to be taking this test. But when I did took the test, and I trained really hard for it for months and passed the test, the most beautiful part of what I got out of that was the sensei saying, here's what being a black belt is. It means you are now a beginner. You have become a beginner, and you are now ready to start really learning.
Beautiful.
And it's kind of, and so, I mean, it's very much in line with the other things that you were saying about becoming a master or being identified as one, or and just again this beautiful process of intuitive learning and innocence of it. And this term beginner's mind. Yes.
It's from Zen Buddhism.
Yes.
And there's the quote the common quote that goes with that is, in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, in the expert mind there are few. And it's a simplified, of course there's exceptions to all that, but in general what they're saying is that, when you become an expert, very often what you do is you have a very codified way of doing stuff. It's like, I do this, this way and that way, and in a beginner's mind, there's every possibility. You don't know yet. And matter of fact, this is a good example. In my songwriting class that I taught at the Pop Academy, I started just with this big group of kids, and then they said, well, maybe you need to split it into the beginners and the advanced. And we talked about that. And then I was observing my class and thinking about how I would do that. And then I realized, oh God, no, that would be the worst thing in the world, because that exact same thing. There are in every class there would be kids just like, oh yeah, they've already written a lot of songs. And literally I had ones that came in and was like, I've never written a song, and I don't know anything about it. But it was so beautiful, because those beginner ones would sometimes come in and do just really interesting stuff that the advanced ones would be going, oh, wow, that's it. And like, it kind of gave them a kick in the ass. Like, man, I need to freshen my thing up. And that's exactly what it is. It's like,
absolutely. So. And when we were training in martial arts also, everybody trains together. Beginners and black belts. You might pair off separately at some point, but you're all training together. And I had only been in class, I don't know, a couple of months, and I felt like a complete spaz. And and I grew up athletic and exercising and everything, but this was just so different.
Yeah, sure.
One thing that was really cool about it was, because I was doing this as an adult freely, there was no consequence in sucking.
Right.
It's kind of like when you're early coming up as a musician.
Yes.
Like, it was kind of fun.
That's a gift. It
really was. It absolutely was. And then I found, because for me, previous to that, the only other thing that was fun to suck at was miniature golf or something like that, where that's part of the fun is just not being very good at it. When we have such a high standard and responsibility and sort of in our career, you can't really suck a lot.
Right.
And you get a reputation really quickly of not being reliable or accountable, or when you're just being human, you're doing your best, and so we don't have a lot of latitude when we're on stage for that. Although as you get older and more seasoned, you get to bring that in, the human factor. But the point is, I had only been studying for a couple months martial arts, and somebody new came in, and I was still trying to figure out how to balance physically and remember all these katas and things like that. And they had me go teach the new person. Okay, Terry, you go show that person how to do that. And it's like, I don't know how to do that yet. And they said, go show them how to do it. And I remember talking to my cousin about it, who had studied martial arts his whole life. My cousin Glenn, who was also a superb doctor and trauma center specialist, and and he basically said, here's how we learned in medical school coming up.
Yeah.
Watch one, do one, teach one. So he said, you're qualified.
Exactly. Yeah. No, indeed, exactly. Isn't it funny? It's like, it's counterintuitive in a way.
Very
and
much
yet
so. But you're a beautiful teacher, and you went in thinking, well, I'm not qualified because I don't have the credentials or I don't have the formal training. But in a sense, that's your superpower.
Yeah, I mean, for me, really, literally, every coaching session, every class, everything I did, my measure of how good it went was, it's funny. It gets back to what we were talking about with mixing a song. It's like, how was the vibe? And in the great classes, it was like the vibe was just great, and I felt the energy moving in the room. And I don't even know exactly what I even said and what happened, but there was just a great energy in the room, and everyone was a part of that. They all were contributing their energy, and that for me was a successful class. And I never was able to have like a curriculum. Never have had a curriculum. Right. I just have kind of all these ideas floating around in my head, and each time it's different. That's the other reason that I have my criticism sometimes of the academic environment. It's just that I don't know how you can have a system that's really that can be often at times rote, and one size fits all kind of curriculums, when it's like, God, every student is so different. They all have different needs. I look at it like, it's like you're dealing with like all these different species of animals. And it's like, and then like a one size all for curriculum is like, okay, here's the same food for all of these different, it's like, wait, but this only nourishes maybe 2 or 3 of them, but the rest of them, it doesn't. And it's like, you really have to have this environment where they all get to kind of be who they are. And you find ways to let them, and I think in an open environment, they just automatically kind of find their own way. Mm-hmm. And that's what it always was to me. It was just like, it was creating an environment, not about like, here's my curriculum, here's the things you're going to learn. It's like, no, I create an environment, and you have to make it up as you go along every time, it's like, and that's actually the funnest part in some ways. It's like, wow, I came up with something really interesting this time I never did before. But that was cool, In the songwriting class, especially, it really just, what we did, we basically did like a songwriters in the round. That was the thing I settled on, was like, that worked out the best. I hated the thing. I finally realized having them all sitting in rows and standing in front was like, no. The circle was great, because then it was like everyone was equal, and everyone just brought their music in and played it, and it was a group feedback thing. And of course, I would also like, once in a while I would dream up some kind of like, it was like trigger, assignments that are triggers. Mm-hmm. That's what you're looking for. It's like, this would be nice, because this will kind of trigger you to come up with, cool. And that was the only thing I try to do. And otherwise it was a group feedback thing. And I always loved, because in the group feedback, students would come up with, very often, the best feedback was some student would go like, wow, when I heard you do that, maybe it would be nice if you blah, blah, blah. And I don't know. And it's like that stuff, it was really powerful that way, because then it's like, I'm not just the person that's up here going, okay, you guys play your stuff and I'm going to tell you what's right or wrong about it, which I would never do anyway. But just that the feedback was from everybody. And that in that way, everyone really was able to be themselves, not only as a songwriter presenting their stuff, but as a person responding to it from their own sensibility. Yeah. And that they knew it was like, it's like, there's no right and wrong here. And it's like, it's songwriting especially. I fell in love with teaching that, because it's something that I feel like, especially because you can't teach it. I love the fact that it's like interesting, like Paul McCartney. I've watched several interviews of his where they always inevitably at some point ask him about, well, what can the greatest living songwriter. Really, I think it's kind of can't really argue too much about that. Yeah. And it's like, so yeah, what can you tell us about songwriting? And he really, every time that question comes up, he's like, I have no idea. I don't know. Because there's no rules, it's like, he just said, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I'll do it. It's just, and it really is that. It's a mystery. That's why it's great. It's because if it wasn't a mystery, if it was just like building a desk, here's how you do it. You just take this and you put that there, and it's like, no, it's a mystery, and every time you never know what's going to happen. And when magic strikes and you catch a little piece of, that magic, it's like, it's amazing. And I love being in the middle of that process and facilitating it as best as I can, and staying the fuck out of the way as much as I can too. The first F-bomb of the interview, by the way.
and an excellent use of the word fuck. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Very well placed and intended. I want to, before I get to my closing questions, what you're speaking about right now, which is so interesting to me, and I'm so aligned with what both you guys are saying. Would you share? You and I were talking. We've been talking the last couple of days, which has been great. Just to catch up. But you were talking about those moments when you're playing harmonica, for example, where sometimes you feel like you don't know what to play, or you don't even know where the notes are. And in those moments, when you feel you know nothing, it opens up a door for this opportunity for this magic to come through, like the real special stuff. Yeah. Can you just elaborate on that, or tell your version of that story? Because I was so mesmerized when you were explaining that to me the other day. Yeah,
it's an interesting. Yeah, and especially it's interesting, like you say, when people, talk about,
say that you're a master.
And all that, because I already know for one thing, on a technical level, because I'm in the harmonica community, which like basically no one knows most of those musicians, because most of them just exist in this harmonica world. They make their little harmonica records that really other harmonica players hear. Mm-hmm. And, I'm kind of an outlier there because I've played on artist records. Right. And then that is a small group of people. I mean, Toots and Stevie have done it. And there's a few other people that also have done that as well, on well-known people's records. Right. But I know these other players out there that are just phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal. And if I look at myself next to them, I think, I feel like I'm a child in a way. I mean, I can't do, but I mean, at the same time, I realize, that's what we talked about. It's like, I came to understand my own strength had nothing to do with what I can do technically. It had to do, again, with capturing vibe, and that's it. It's like, that's the only thing I'm interested in when I'm playing. And the more I focused on that, again, it's just like everything you like, I love that saying. It's like, you are what you repeatedly do. You are what you repeatedly focus on. And when you focus on vibe, it gets stronger. And I think that's what I think all of the masters, they just live in vibe. They never knew how to live anywhere else. Stevie Wonder only lived in vibe. There was never a time when he was like, oh, I was more of a technical guy. No, you were just always, you were pure vibe from the beginning. So the more closer you can get to trying to be that thing, pure vibe. And it means letting go of control. Mm-hmm. And it means being in that space where sometimes you feel like, God, do I even know what to do here at all? I don't know. I mean, I feel that regularly. I don't know what to do here at all.
So can you describe, I know the feeling really well, of course. Yeah. As a musician, as an artist, as a human. Can you describe what that experience is like when you have your harmonica in your hand, you're in a recording studio with a major artist, and your mind goes blank. And once the fear and anxiety of that, or the panic, even if it's just for a brief blink of an eye, you have this feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing here, and I don't even know what happens next. What's that experience that allows you to get out of judging yourself, and then when this other opportunity for some magnificence happens, and it comes through you? How do you transition from one to the other, and what are those moments like for you?
I guess the thing is that because I'm autodidact, as they call it here, I'm a self-taught musician, that I've been used to kind of that's kind of my normal, I don't really know another way. So I mean, it's funny because a lot of times in those, like being in the studio with Maurice White, mm-hmm. Producing, looking at him through the glass, it was really afterwards I would think about it and go like, I'd feel more nervous about it afterwards. Think, oh, Jesus, that's kind of, but in the moment I was just kind of like, well, I'm just here doing what I normally do. And I'm just, And it's funny. It's also an interesting thing. Sometimes I don't know. There's serendipity. What is serendipity? How does that happen? Mm-hmm. What is serendipity? But it seems like because that's just who I am, those kinds of opportunities showed up that fit me. And it seems like almost all the time that those kinds of things came up, I walked in and it was like, oh, I know this vibe. I think I can create something for this vibe. I feel this, basically, I mean, pretty much all the most important records I played on, that's what it felt like. I just kind of walked, it just felt serendipitous. But I mean, it was because they were asking me to do it because they wanted me to do what I do. That's the thing too.
You've also had these moments in the studios that you talk about in your post and your storytelling.
Yeah.
Sharing your recording experiences, which I really appreciate that you do, where you've gone and you've played something and the producer, the engineer, the artist, all world-renowned people say, wow, that's fantastic. That's absolutely perfect. And you feel like there's something more that you could do. And you've asked on occasion if you could take another crack at it, to save that and do that. And then something even more happens. Yeah, that happened with the second Jarreau record I played on. That's the story I was remembering.
Yeah, I was playing because I got there and it was Tommy LaPuma and Al Schmidt at Capitol Studios, which was great by itself. Amazing. But he wasn't there, and so I just like, great, we're cutting this song, and I did the first pass, and then I could hear that, that distinctive voice of his in the back. He just had walked into the control room. He's like, you're done. That it's just kind of like a little bit nasal voice. And I was like, oh, Al, whoa. I said, thanks. I'd like to do just one more pass because I feel like I feel like the vibe isn't 100% there. And the second pass I felt a lot better about. And then, that was it. It doesn't always happen that way.
Right. Sometimes the first one is it.
Sometimes it is. And I mean, it's always different. Everything is different, and there isn't one way that it happens. And getting back to the thing, what you're talking about of feeling just in general, there's just all kinds of moments where I'm not necessarily in the recording studio all the time, but just sometimes when I'm just playing where I just will feel like, wow, literally, I don't have, put it this way, for one thing, I don't know exactly every note if I'm playing a note, it's like, is that an E flat or is that I'm not really sure. It's really just a sound. Mm-hmm. It's a vibe, really, it's a vibe. It's like, I'm playing, it's like, what are all those notes? I don't know. That's a phrase that I want to play right there, mm-hmm. is what it is. And so that's what everything is for me, is finding just phrases that feel good to me. And that's the thing. And the other thing that happens when I'm recording at home, especially, someone sends me a track and it's like, okay, I can take all the time I want. And a lot of times it's like, I'll take some passes, and I realize those passes I just did are technically fine. Totally fine, and no one would ever say, there's anything wrong with those. I know there's not. They just vibe-wise, I'm just not getting any kind of juice from it. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to put it down, and I'm going to come back tomorrow, and I'm going to take another. And usually, generally speaking, getting another fresh start at it will help me get there. But of course, you're always going to have sessions, that you have some sessions that you like better than other sessions. And there's some things you go like, that one's okay. And that one I'm pretty damn happy with. And of course, in general, you're never 100% happy with anything. And that's, I think any artist, that's how that's why you should be kind of somewhat good at what you do, because you're never 100% satisfied.
Right. We're reaching for more always.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, indeed.
I want to continue this conversation for all night. However, I know we can get there, so I'm going to get to my closing questions.
All right.
And the first is, since this show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally? That's a great question. I think making it is extremely personal. I think it's
it has very little to do with whatever the external measurements of what making it is. And to me, I mean, especially, and if you do it long enough, I think then it becomes really even more kind of crystal clear. It's like making it to me is yeah, I mean, being able to survive in the music business, number one, and just to be able to have as many just joyful moments making music as I possibly can. And I mean, you know, that's the thing. When I started out, that's the thing. I was going to say, this is another interesting thing that I felt like the pandemic has really brought up, is that because I've done a lot of these quarantine things, you know, like these people do like these quarantine productions where it's like everybody does their part at home.
Right.
Yeah. And there, you know, a lot of them, especially from friends of mine, have been ones where it's like, yeah, look, you know, it's just, we're doing this for fun. Mm-hmm. It's not for anything else. And so, yeah, with my friends, it's like, yeah, cool. Yeah, fine. I'll do that. And I realized from doing a couple of those where it was like, yeah, I'm not getting paid to do this. But then suddenly I found myself digging in and doing a lot more than I would normally do. If this was a track where I was being hired to play, I would just be doing what they were asking me to do. Mm-hmm. But instead, I just opened up and I became playful. And I realized, I'm going back to when I first started in music, because none of us started in music going, wow, wonder what my career is going to be like in this. It's like, no, it's just like, wow, that lick is so cool. Whoa. And I just did it. That's cool. I mean, it's so dirt simple in a way, and just so pure. Again, getting back to like the pure thing of indigenous musicians. Mm-hmm. It's just like you're just in the middle of playing music because it's such a miraculous, incredible thing to be able to do, and it's just such a fundamentally human thing to do. And doing those projects was great, because I just suddenly realized I was making, like, for vocal stuff, I was making these big vocal arrangements that I had never really done something like on a couple of them. It was like, it was just fun. And I was like, that's why I'm just doing this because of the pure joy of it. Right. And yeah, I mean, so yeah, that's maybe getting a little slightly off subject, but it really is part of the idea of making it is just that it's something that if you can maintain music being something that you love doing through your whole life. And I love doing it more now than I ever did. And that's important, because that's the other thing. I think maybe we talked about this, Jerry, was that there's some amazing artists that I played with who stopped enjoying doing music a long time ago. Right. It's just a job. They go out and they crank out their hits. They're super sick of doing, and not all of them. There's some other ones that aren't in that place, but I know some that are. And I think, God, even as much as you would think, when you love to have that success, it's like, but I wouldn't trade it if I had to trade my love and enthusiasm for doing music that I have now, if it was just for that material success. Yeah.
The joy, fun factor, the curiosity factor,
exactly.
Is what, man, it's such a gift.
Yeah.
They talk about, talent being a gift and all that, but and I certainly believe that in some ways it is, and then there's the hours and years of crafting, but there's such a gift in the joy of the playfulness of it.
And that's, again, getting back to what you can really learn from indigenous cultures. Right. Is you watch. I love the fact that also in indigenous cultures, like African cultures, are the ones I look at a lot. Is like everybody plays music. Mm-hmm. There's not, matter of fact, there's not even a word for musician in some of African languages. I was
point that out. You had told me that the other day. There's no word for music.
Yeah,
it's just something like breathing.
And the other thing is that music and dance are the same word for a lot of those African languages, which I really love that, because it's like, for them, it's like, so what do you mean? There's people who don't dance when they do music? It's like, yes, in the West, there's a lot of them, actually, that don't even move at all.
Right. Second of my 3 closing questions is, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Ooh, 3 tips for success. Okay, here's the 3 tips. I don't know if I have, okay, let me see if I have 3. I think I do. Actually, one of them that I remember hearing this a while back. It's a quote that's been around for a while, and I think I heard it from Ricky Minor from a book he had written. Mm-hmm. And I thought he had said it, but it actually went back further. And it's the simplest quote in the world. It's the simplest principle in the world. And the reason that it makes a huge difference is that almost nobody does it, even though it's really simple to do. And that quote is, always do more than what is expected. Mm-hmm. So simply what that means, and it's just like whether you're rehearsing for a live performance, you got hired to play for some live performance, or you're doing a recording session, whatever it is they're asking you to do a little bit more. Do something that they didn't ask you to do. And it's like, you will stand out. I mean, because we all know that thing. It's like if you hire somebody, it's like this, because what we're most used to is like, okay, I hired these people to do this show. And how many people showed up that were like, oh yeah, no, well, I kind of listened to it, but I think it's like, okay, oh God, all right, thanks. It's like, but the one that shows up is like, no, I got it all down. Oh, and also, yeah, there was this other part I heard that was cool. I picked that part up. It's like, really? Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. You know, it's like, if you just do that basically in everything you do, and again, it's just a little extra effort, a little extra time, you will make yourself memorable. And it's funny because you would think, isn't there a lot of, no, there actually are not a lot of people who take that approach. And so for me
it is a very rare
attribute
thing to do.
Yeah. And so that for me is probably the number one thing. And just, the simple, very simple things like just showing up on time and being just a personal person to be around, just being an enjoyable person to be around, and just be aware of that kind of stuff. How are you fitting in with the hang, and how are you, are you making things more difficult, or are you making things easier? Those are simple things. And of course, but they make a difference, right? Because you also know the thing about, like, if you are thinking about hiring for some gig where it's like, okay, this is a gig and actually we got to hang out too. I got a person that, man, just burning, unbelievable player. And this other person who's just a good musician, but a really cool person to hang out with. Oh, we're going to go with the really cool person to hang out with who's just a good musician instead of the like super burning person who's like kind of a pain in the ass. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh God, that's not even a decision. Yeah. It's like, yeah, oh, certainly I'll do that. So that's two. Three, I guess, is probably buy a van. Was that?
You don't want to be blowing a van. You want to have a friend with a van.
Exactly.
That's my fourth tip.
Have a good friend with a van. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. I mean,
this whole conversation has been filled with tips, so you don't have to feel pressured in any way.
But I mean, yeah, the whole thing about, so of course, the other thing about making it in the music business is that the whole definition of that has changed dramatically, from the time, especially when we were like starting out. I was thinking about this too, how, because I have like, especially some students of mine that a couple of them have actually even gone to LA and hung out. And, but whenever they ask me like, man, I want to go out there and, hang out, see if something can happen. It's like, it is a totally different scene from back in the day when it was like, oh, you can go down and hang out at whatever club it is, Josefina's or Cordial or something. And it's like, yeah, and there's like, oh, there's the bass player from Michael Jackson's band, and there's blah, and you could hang, you would do that, and you would meet people, and that's how you would actually eventually kind of get connected and things could happen. It's like, but that doesn't really exist anymore. There's not that kind of thing anymore. It's a different kind of scene, and most stuff is done in people's, producers' bedrooms with their computer. And, it's a different kind of scene. So I making it does take on a whole different meaning, and I think, then it becomes something more you have to define for yourself. But ultimately I think it should always come down to what is, where you feel happy and feel like you're in a good place. Mm-hmm. Because I do know a lot of music students also who go through an enormous amount of stress, about worrying about, God, am I doing the right thing? And how am I setting myself up for the future? And, it's a really amazing irony, because I've also spent some time in a couple third world countries. I also did a music program in Eritrea. And you go down there and you see these people that live in such, in really challenging circumstances, and how you look and I go like, but they're so connected to each other, and I see a kind of a happiness with them that I don't really recognize as being as common in Western culture, where we have everything. We have all the advantages in the world, and it's like, but really it's connecting with people, and the things I learned on my songwriting retreats as well. It's like it's your connections to people that are really, ultimately, I think, the most enduring thing. And it's like, what a perfect example, like you and me and Troy, and like all the people we know. Here we are, all the decades later, still, sitting here and chewing the fat and telling stories.
Still friends, still
friends, and still creating, and still sharing our process and sharing our journey. And that's gold. I mean, it's gold. I mean, because all the triumphs and all the failures and the triumphs that all come with it, they come and go. But I mean, those aren't going to sustain you. I mean, it's the relationships. I guess I put it that way. It's the relationships you have in your professional life and your personal life that are going to really sustain you more than what succeeds and doesn't succeed, I think, ultimately.
I'm with you on that. And my final question, before I turn the stage over to you for your closing thoughts, is, at this point of your life, Tollak, with everything that you know to be true, if you could, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, yeah. I would have probably had some fashion advice. I definitely would have had some fashion advice. Oh, dude, no. Do not leave the house. Do not leave the house with that on.
You're not going to wear that, are you?
No. Oh, God, no. What? Who told you a mullet was no?
It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's funny. It's something I think maybe it was something my father actually said.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of stuck with me, because I remember him saying at one point, when he was already probably in his mid to late 70s, and so, if I could go back, I would just worry about a lot less shit.
Mm-hmm.
I just worried about so much shit, and and that's it.
Right there.
It's just like you waste so much time and worrying about stuff. I mean, here's a great Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, because the kids love that. Some of your hurts you have cured, and the worst you still have. Hold on. Some of your hurts you have cured, and the worst you still have survived. But what torrents of grief you endured for evils which never arrived.
Mm.
And that kind of sums it up to me. It's like, that's what he does. You worry about so much shit, and 99% of it never even happens anyway. And it's like, if I could go back, I would shake myself by the shoulders and see if I could get that through.
I'm glad
Quit worrying so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, indeed. And another, just a related story quickly, is that my dad had a very good friend who was at D-Day. And as you can imagine, if you were a soldier on Omaha Beach on D-Day, he just thought, I'm definitely dying today.
Mm-hmm.
He just thought, there's just no way you're going to survive this. He goes, but if I survive this, I'm never worrying about another freaking thing in the rest of my life. And he survived it. And my dad goes, by God, Frank never worried about another damn thing the rest of his life. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Just like, man, after that, I can deal with whatever. And that's it. It's like, everything, you deal with everything. It always works out. Afterwards, you can look back. It's like, I was so worried about that. It worked out. So how about just not going through that step of worrying first? How about skipping that step and just go with like, it's going to work out.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Wonderful. Yeah. Absolutely wonderful.
Cool.
Where can people find you? Your music?
Yeah.
Videos?
I am, well, as I told you, I'm rebuilding my website. So that's not, right now it's just pointed to my Facebook artist page.
Which, by the way, I love that you can still have this really remarkable career and not have a website up and running. I think that's kind of cool. That's badass.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess it's funny because there are a few artists I've run across over the last few years that I noticed like, oh, they don't really have a website and they're doing all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I mean, but I think ultimately it's better to have a website up.
And the actual location of the website, tollakollestad.com, is that?
It's just tollak.com, yeah. And right now it's going to my Facebook artist page. Okay. And so yeah, basically that's it's my social media stuff is Facebook, and then on YouTube, of course. So a lot of the stuff I've done is also on YouTube as well.
Since our show is completely unedited and my questions are done, is there anything on your heart, your mind that you'd like to share with the listeners or our listeners or end this conversation with?
Yeah. So I have these 3 little pieces of advice I give because, like I told you, so many students are struggling with stress. I mean, yeah, everyone is struggling with stress, and I said, yeah, I have kind of this little checklist of 3 things that are simple that I kind of keep in my head when I'm, because especially those, we have those days where it's just like, man, this is one of those days where it's just things are not clicking, at all. And especially now, I think in the pandemic, and it's like, so 3 things for me are like, am I hydrated? Because a lot of times it's like, well, I haven't really had it. It's like, yeah, because that immediately has an effect on your brain. It's like, so if you're already having kind of an off day, don't add to it by being dehydrated too. I also like to do, it doesn't have to be complicated breathing exercises, but we generally breathe, and this is also kind of from yoga, breathe so shallow during the day. And that actually builds stress in your body. So sometimes even when you're feeling stress, if you literally just stop and just do that for like about a minute, and it's amazing sometimes right away you just are like, oh, okay, that feels better. And then the third thing that's really huge for me is taking walks. I've become like a huge fan of taking walks. And there's a lot of scientific research around it as well. And, of course, Steve Jobs was famous for like taking all of his meetings while he walked, because it's like he said, yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of things when I'm struggling with something's like, oh, let's get out and walk. And it's like, yeah, solutions start to come, those kinds of things. And just generally just for overall health too, I just feel better when I walk basically every day. If it can be half hour, 45 minutes, and it really makes a difference. So those are my helpful hints. Helpful hints from Heloise.
Tollak tips.
There you go.
Troy and all of our listeners, thank you for spending all of this time with us today. I really enjoyed to connect with you and just have this beautiful friendship that we've had for so many years. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, well, this is a pleasure. I love this, and I think, and by the way, for everybody who is watching this, who hasn't seen, Terry's just got all of his interviews he's done over the last few years with like amazing people, like writers and actors and musicians and all kinds of creative people. It's incredible stuff, and you've done such an amazing job with that. And there's a reason that all those people were like, jumped at the chance to do it with you. So I recommend everybody check through that archive. It's really, really fantastic. Thank you for that. They've been remarkable conversations. I feel like I got a front row seat to some really fascinating life. So educator-speaker.com is a great place to find everything. And cool. Again, Tollak Ollestad, you're a master, or you are having a masterful life. Let me just say that. Oh, thank you. That's a nice way to say it. Take good care. Thank you, everybody. Right. Stay safe. Stay inspired.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.